What is up, everyone? The Convo back in business for Oakridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakridgeFord.com. Employee pricing is in the rearview mirror, but 0% on many models up to 72 months is in effect right now. Great discounts, too. Get at me on Twitter at I am Norman James. This is the podcast for Sunday, October 4th, 2020. Norm James in London, Ontario, along with Mike Augello in Cheektowaga, New York. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Norman. We are looking forward to I would say, rather eventful week with the NHL draft and free agency next Friday. And I'm sure the Leafs are going to be making some news between now and then.
Okay. Does it involve a goaltending move?
It could. I do think that the possibility, and now I have been focused on Matt Murray as the target of the Leafs goaltending wants. I may be off base on that, but I'm just basing it on, history based on Kyle Dubas when he was negotiating the Phil Kessel deal with Pittsburgh, wanting Matt Murray, who played at the Sioux, and obviously Matt Murray is 26 years old and has won 2 cups, would conceivably, in his eyes, be an upgrade over Freddie Anderson. Now Tristan Jarry signs a 3-year contract extension for $3.5 million per season. They may qualify Murray, but Pittsburgh really doesn't have the cap space to sign Murray to even a 1-year deal. So I think Jim Rutherford is going to trade him. And if he does trade him, I think Kyle Dubas will be in on it. Question is what they would have to give up and how much it would cost for him to sign. And that's where, the Robin Lehner news from yesterday popped in. He signed a 5-year deal for $5 million per season. That's the same amount as Freddie Anderson. I don't think that Matt Murray or any other goaltender on the open market is going to be able to demand any more than Robin Lehner did. So if they could get Matt Murray in a trade and sign him for a long-term deal for less than $5 million, the Leafs would be saving money and probably getting a younger and potentially a better goaltender.
This would be a move to get younger, for sure. But is this move only necessitated by the need for more funds freed up to take a run at Alex Pietrangelo?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how much money will be cleared. I think I said this yesterday on Twitter. I think the want to have long-term security in goal is just as great as the want to upgrade at the position. I personally think that Murray is a very good goaltender, and I mean, the only thing I can say, I like Freddie Anderson. I think Freddie Anderson is a good goaltender. I think he's been a victim of the Leafs' defense the last 4 years. But maybe it is time for a change. But the reality here is Freddie Anderson's got 1 year left in a contract, and at $5 million. And if he has a good year, and if the Leafs have a good year and he has success, then he's going to ask for a raise. He's going to look for $6.5 million in free agency. And I don't think the Leafs can pay that. When you have a goaltending market that is swamped, and goaltenders are probably, with the financial realities of the NHL right now, going to likely have to take less than that on a long-term or even a short-term or 2 or 3 year deal. That's an opportunity for Kyle Dubas to have a just as good a goaltender as Anderson for less money.
Optically, a move like that would suggest the Leafs are circumventing the real issue. However, a signing like this would be a bigger picture kind of signing. Hey, you know what? We have problems defensively, but there are other things that we need to mind, other things we need to tend to, and bringing in Matt Murray on a long-term contract that is financially friendly to the organization does lend to potential moves on the back end that would help the Leafs along the way.
Well, I mean, some people would think it's change for change's sake. I don't think so, because I think Murray was fantastic in the 2 years that he won cups with Pittsburgh. He had his career worst year last year. There is a concern in terms of durability because he seems to get hurt every year. With the Leafs, that would have been more of a concern a few years ago with, Curtis McElhinney or Garrett Sparks in goal. I think Jack Campbell is a very good number 2, and he's going to get a lot more work this year, whoever the number 1 is. But, this is a situation where, this team needs to make changes. They can't really stick with the same things after 4 consecutive years of failure in the postseason. So, I'm not saying that the switch to Matt Murray, if they do make a trade for him from Freddie Anderson, is going to make all the difference. It has to be in concert with other moves that Kyle Dubas has to make.
This is the Leafs Convo for Oakridge Ford. OakridgeFord.com. OG's Converse, thank you very much for your interaction, your participation, your support of this project. Like this post on YouTube, please and thanks. And why not subscribe to the channel? So many listens, thousands and thousands of listens. Our subscribership and our listenership disproportionate. Let's keep trending it towards that solidification of your support of this podcast by hitting the subscribe button. Thank you very much for everything you do for the convo. Mike and I are here for you. Bruce H. and community, how important is it for the Maple Leafs to get out of the gate strong this coming season?
It's always important to get off to a great start. I mean, we have to first determine when the season is going to start, because right now it could be December. More likely is going to be January. Will it be 70 games or 82 games? I mean, the shorter the season, the more important that it is to get off to a good start. But the most important thing is the strength of the roster going into that season. And I think the next couple of weeks is going to be a big determining factor in, how good the Leafs are going to be. You know that more than likely Tampa is going to be a little weaker after winning their Stanley Cup, because they're in cap jail and they have to sign a couple guys like Cirelli and Sergachev. So they're going to have to clear a couple players off their roster. And there are rumors that the Boston Bruins are in on Oliver Ekman-Larsson and or Alex Pietrangelo. So if that's the case, then other teams in the division are getting stronger and the Leafs will have to get stronger to compete with them.
Arish is wondering, also in community, if the Leafs don't get Pietrangelo and get two top four defensemen who can play the right side, instead, who do they get?
Well, Elliot Friedman talked about this on his 31 Thoughts podcast, and he threw out a few names that I thought were intriguing. Obviously, if they're going for Pietrangelo, and he's going to be probably in the $8.5 to $9 million range, I don't know how willing they're going to be to go for two, say, $4 million defensemen, because I think they're only willing to spend that money on somebody who's a top end guy like Pietrangelo. You hear names like Chris Tanev, who we've heard about for a few years, who's a good stay-at-home defenseman who actually can skate. He played with Quinn Hughes this year in Vancouver, and he played with Morgan Rielly a few years ago at a World Championship. And ever since then, and since he's a Toronto native, his name has been connected with the Leafs. He's a UFA. Dylan DeMello, who played for Ottawa and was later traded to Winnipeg and played really well with the Jets. He probably would be a lower cost option. And then, we've heard Radko Gudas and we've heard TJ Brody. TJ Brody, he's a left-handed defenseman who plays the right side, which is what the Leafs have in abundance right now. They tried, apparently he was part of the deal that Calgary offered for Nazem Kadri last year. That got aborted because Kadri wouldn't waive his no trade clause to go to the Flames. So the Leafs clearly have interest in him, but I'm not sure if they're in a position to outbid Calgary if they want to keep him, because they have basically no right side of their defense. So there's a number of options there. I just think that Pietrangelo is the best option, but it may not be where Dubas wants to go, because if they go after Pietrangelo, it would force him to trade Nylander to clear space, and it doesn't sound like he really wants to do that.
I asked the question, what is it about the Bolts you'd like for the Buds in community, of course? Great place to get involved with other OGs and converts. Corey Parrish, I would love to see the Leafs compete like the Lightning did all playoffs. James D. Feels like the Lightning really grew from all of their previous playoff failures. That's the thing. When Tampa got dumped prematurely by Columbus 2 seasons ago, I mean, that destroyed their psyche, but it didn't destroy their ability to overcome that failure. Clearly, now Stanley Cup champions. The Maple Leafs, year after year after year, lose in the first round. They can't seem to get over their failures, and that is a huge problem for this organization as a whole.
Well, there's a difference between, people forget that essentially the core group of that Tampa Bay team. They made the Cup final in 2015 against the Hawks. They've made a conference final. It's not like they've lost in the first round every year. They have had some success. They just hadn't until this year won the great prize. The Leafs haven't been able to get out of the first round. So, I mean, what I think the Leafs should emulate is look at what Tampa Bay did. Not only did their key players like Palat, Killorn, Kucherov, and Point sort of, I think they played a more aggressive game. They added players that were hungry and that were physical. Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow, Zach Bogosian, Patrick Maroon. They added Shattenkirk as a free agent after he was bought out by the Rangers. They added talent. They added toughness. The Leafs need to do the same thing. This is a market this off season, that there are going to be veterans out there that are looking for jobs. And instead of, I made this point a couple weeks ago, instead of having as your 13th forward Freddie Gauthier and your 7th defenseman Martin Marincin, it would be nice to have quality depth in for your organization when players get hurt and not have to play guys who are clearly not NHLers. That's what Dubas has to do, is add quality depth.
Murray Lindsay, we'll get over our recency bias and dip into the past a little bit. Memories of defensemen from the past, such as McCabe, Caberlet, and going back even further, Dmitry Yushkevich. How would those Leafs teams from 2000 to 2004 fare today?
It's tough to say. I mean, I think that team in 2003 and 2004, the ones, I mean, I give Pat Quinn credit. He recognized the shortcomings of those teams. He added Brian Leetch. He added Owen Nolan. He added
and those were the Ed Belfort teams.
Right. He added Ron Francis. He added a lot of veterans, Neuendijk in 2002. They added to the core group. It was simply not Matt Sundin. It was simply not just McCabe and Caberlet and Cujo. They added to that group. They knew, but it was a different system back then. You could do that. It was basically throwing money at the problem. There's a salary cap now, so you're limited into what you can do. But I think that approach is what Tampa and what Dallas used this year. They added to the core group, and those players like Pavelski and Corey Perry and Sekera helped Dallas get to the Cup final, and the guys that I mentioned before helped Tampa Bay win the ultimate prize.
Yeah, that 0-2 team winning the conference finals against Carolina, game 1, and I'm thinking they're home and cooled. And then they lose in 6, Marty Jelena with that goal. Of course, they wouldn't even have gotten that far had Matt Sundin not scored that heroic goal with seconds left in regulation to push it back there. Mike, I know you love Matt Sundin. They would have probably would have been trounced by the Red Wings in that Stanley Cup final anyway.
Injuries killed that team. Remember, Sundin went down, I think, in the first game of the first round, and or even before then, I think, because Alan McCauley was basically the number 1 center on that team. And, they got great performances out of guys like Travis Green and Shane Corson. And, that's the reason that, and Sundin only came back at maybe 50% in that Carolina series. And like you mentioned, that first game, they won the first game, and then they brought everybody back, like Lume, Tucker, Sundin, and then they lost 3 straight, and then they won. Yeah. So, I mean, that if injuries hadn't killed that team, I think that they would have had a good chance to get to the Cup final. I don't know if they would have won because Carolina got destroyed. But that's the past.
Mike, when the puck drops on the next NHL season, whenever that is, how much different will this Maple Leafs team look?
Well, I think there is going to be a significant changeover, not only with players that they've added outside the organization, but with youngsters. I mean, I'm convinced that Nick Robertson is going to be part of the, the starting lineup on opening night. I probably think Rasmus Sandin an outside chance at Timothy Liljegren, but it's probably that might be he could be traded. He could be with the Marlies, but he could be in the mix. I think it's going to be a changeover of maybe 5 or 6 players, which is not insignificant. And the funny thing is, if the goaltenders change, that's the biggest change of all.
On paper, will the team have moved up in the pecking order, getting closer to true contention hood, or do you think it'll have taken a few steps back and have to make up for it along the way?
It depends on how successful Kyle Dubas is in targeting the players and acquiring the players that he's looking at. I mean, if he is truly going after Petrangelo and they're successful, then I think that the goal for this team is winning the Stanley Cup. I mean, if they don't, then it depends on where he goes with the right side of their blue line. If they're still starting Justin Hall in their top four, and that's not an attack on Justin Hall. I think he's a good 5-6 defenseman, but he was pressed into a shutdown top four role last year because Tyson Berry was not good in his own zone. If that's the case, then I don't think you can expect much more of what they've done over the last couple of years. They need to upgrade their blue line. If they don't, then I don't think this team is going anywhere.
OG's Converse, what do you think the Leafs do at the draft? Make their pick, make a trade, make someone else's pick, have your say inside community. Wanted to give a shout out to Caleb, one of our converts who recently popped into Oakridge Ford and made a vehicle purchase from my colleague Mike Newsom. Thank you very much, Caleb. And thanks to all the OGs and converts who drop into the dealership to say hi and to do business with us, but more importantly, support the project that is the Leafs Convo podcast, heard on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. Mr. Agello, have a good one.
Thanks, Norm.